Hey gang, welcome to our latest edition of the Ilities channel where we discuss all things sustainability, traceability, supply chain visibility, and of course transparency, typically of the product data variation. Today I have a special guest and he wasn't able to join us by a video link, but I was able to catch him on the phone and record our conversation. And he's graciously agreed to for me to share that with you here today. His name is Bob Driggers, and he's been doing sustainability and fresh foods traceability, brand protection, authentication, and supply chain security for more than 20 years, perhaps a little bit longer than I have. And he's the CEO of a company called Authentitrace, which applies an application directly from farm level and then beyond, or farm level down, I should say, to enable trading partners to do traceability essentially with their produce and their fresh foods. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Bob is extremely knowledgeable on the subject, and we discuss FSMA 204, the Product Traceability Initiative, and that all-important topic with traceability, of course, interoperability. So have a listen, and by all means, don't forget to subscribe and hit the thumbs up button if you like the content, and we'll keep bringing more and more of this to you. Thank you, and here we go. So Bob, why not, maybe for our listeners, why don't you tell them, give them a little bit of your background. Who's Bob Driggers, and what's he working on these days?
My name is Bob Driggers. I'm CEO of Authentitrace Incorporated. Authentitrace was founded in 2004 after an outbreak of leafy greens in Southern California and a very marked demand to be able to trace fruits and vegetables quicker than we did in the past. So we have operated in that vertical since 2004 and learned a lot on the way.
Thanks, Bob. And that's 20 years of that's quite significant in terms of time spent in the market, in the field, working with farmers to enable traceability, which I know it doesn't always come naturally for some of the stakeholders that we're talking to. So Bob and I want to talk a little bit more deeply today about FSMA 204, because we know that's top of mind for many of you in the industry. And with Bob's view into things and what he knows is possible, and what his knowledge is of the rule itself, as well as some of the other things that are important to food safety, we're going to explore that a little bit further. So Bob, you and I have talked previously about the PTI, the Product Traceability Initiative, and in that context, FSMA. I understand there's an important for folks to know who might be doing PTI or even not doing PTI, why there's a difference there between PTI and 204, or what that transitioning should look like. What would you say that's helpful in that regard?
Well, I begin by saying let's define FSMA because everyone may not understand that word itself. FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, Article 204 or Rule 204 is what we're referring to. It is a rule that has been put into play that allows for the traceability of very specific produce. The produces listed are listed under the FDA website as the food traceability list. A group of industry experts decided these were some of the highest risk commodities. Anyway, the food traceability list can be found on the FDA website. It is the most at-risk products that we want to begin with. There is talk of rolling this out on a larger scale, but in order to understand feasibility, we had to start with a very specific list. So not all farms, not all packaging facilities, not all produce suppliers will even be affected by FSMA 204 unless you have one of the commodities that are listed on the food traceability list on the FDA website.
Right. So that helps our listeners understand whether they're in scope for compliance or not with what we affectionately now call the FTL. the food traceability list. So we one of the things that I know you and I have spoken, and you've helped dispel something that I've heard from some other experts in the industry, in the food traceability or food safety and food supply chain in the US in particular, and that is they have this perception that even if you have a small portion of food that you're handling throughout the year that is on the list, when it comes to traceability, it's all or nothing. And what I mean by that is they're saying it's too difficult for them to implement a solution that has differences in business processes to enable traceability and compliance with the law, and then do it differently for everything else in their business.
Well, in my experience, it's not so complex. And in fact, it may it may be beneficial for some of these traceability platforms to live in various ERPs, because long term, for this program to be successful, we're going to need the interoperability of software platforms across multiple verticals. Whether your ERP be for just your farm, or whether your ERP is interacting with the retailer's ERPs, or whatever the scenario is that allows you to exchange data and information and house data on your end, it is not an all or nothing thing. So again, some farms will not need any additional ERP or traceability relative to FSMA 204. Others will need a very minute amount of traceability relative to it. Perhaps some as few as just one product that is used as a rotation crop, for example, that may help with soil erosion or multiple things at the farm level. So I would encourage everyone to take the first step of writing out a plan, understanding if you need to be concerned today with FSMA 204 or not. If you have things on the FTL, then yes, you need to be concerned. If you're going to grow things in the next 2 years on the FTL, you should be concerned. But if you have no intention of growing these things for a few years, place your worries where they need to be today, and that is in the traceability aspects that are relative with PTI. So the real key here is interoperability.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think that you brought us back there to what's relevant, and PTI was, of course, the Traceability Initiative, which was I guess in some ways maybe a precursor to the rule, where industry came together in that respect. So that's good, and I'm also glad you mentioned interoperability. I think when we see discussions around FSMA 204 happening, the really knowledgeable folks understand how important interoperability is, because like you, they've had to look at trying to accomplish a trace back. And just like you said, going across an enterprise with different systems, and then up and down to your immediate receiving or trading partners, that interoperability becomes really important to having an expeditious trace back. The FDA is on record as saying that that's what they're trying to accomplish here, is that to get to this thing more, these food safety issues much more quickly, and in a more pointed way, right? Let's go right to where the problem was, and not have to have the industry embargo an entire class of products simply because we can't pinpoint the origins of the issue.
Well put, Tim. Well put. I do know that from my experience, dealing with both farms at every level you can think of, from the smallest of farms that you can imagine to major international corporations, that FSMA 204 was not designed to punish or impugn mid-sized, small, or family farms. Creating any environment that harms these entities cannot be good for the agriculture industry. One of the primary goals of 204 is to expedite tracebacks, as you just mentioned. Electronic reporting is critical in accomplishing these tracebacks. Interoperability is critical in creating an infrastructure where this is possible on a more global basis. Electronic reporting needs to only be uniform in format to work.
Yeah. Well stated. I think hopefully that drives some things home for folks here that uh you know they're not, if you're a small farm holder, you're not alone here. Everybody's got to comply with this if you have products on the FTL. And seek out interoperability. I think that turns me maybe to the last thing we talk about in terms of capabilities. One of the things that I find interesting, and I know you have perspectives on this because you have a platform that enables this, is that usually oftentimes I have to educate an industry client on what traceability is. So for me, traceability is born out of, it's an outcome, right? So it's an outcome born out of the fact that you have to have a business process in place that may be slightly different than what you do today. You have to have identification of the things you want to trace and the data that's associated with them. And then you're going to want to have some digital component, something, at least in this day and age, where perhaps it's we know paper is acceptable, but you still have to translate that for FSMA 204 to some sort of list that can be searched. But that platform or your ERP or something is the final component. Well, maybe the final component beyond that is actually standards to enable interoperability. But this is challenging for companies, right? Even if you sit there and explain to them that these elements are necessary, how do you help them go about wrapping their heads around the investment needed and the capabilities and the change management that's gonna be necessary?
Well, let's cut to the chase of that because it's directly related to funding.
Yeah.
For a long time, traceability in any form has been seen as a liability at across the supply chain. And ultimately, we need solution sets that are assets to the growers, packers, supply chain partners, retailers, institutions, consumers, solution providers who focus on interoperable solutions that are assets instead of liabilities will have long-term success in their industry. The best way to accomplish this, in my opinion, is to listen a little closer to those in the industry at all levels and not just listen to the solution providers that say, you have to do it our way.
Yep.
There is no one way that is the best for everyone. So create your plan, follow your plan, put a champion internally in charge. And what I mean by that is have someone that answers directly to senior management, do the research. They can look at the PTI website, the FDA website. They can contact yourself or me, and I'll be glad to assist them. But educate yourself on this. And as a solution supplier, how we turn this perceived liability into an asset is we have to find something valuable for that brand owner, whether it's consumer interaction, whether it's less rejections, or even saving money on insurance premiums because you're doing things at a higher level from a traceability standpoint, is all important in understanding why FSMA 204 is needed in our industry, how we can implement it, and how it can be an asset instead of a liability.
Powerful thoughts there in terms of I agree with you. And I think as companies approach it as an investment other than just a cost, it can help you get your leaders and your colleagues to embrace the right way to it. Because oftentimes what I hear as pushback to these things, whether there's regulation or not, is that traceability is like the super expensive insurance policy that I hope I never need and don't want to acknowledge. When in reality, there are business benefits to doing things like this, as you've explained briefly, that you can reduce waste, you can optimize your network of production and supply, because now all of a sudden you have some visibility you didn't have before, which I think is valuable and helps justify the investment, even beyond compliance. Well, Bob, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights and your expertise with our viewers. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you for the platform, Tam. Appreciate you.